0% of the nominees approved by unanimous consent. Now, let's put that in perspective. We are speaking about non-controversial nominees, and it's been something that's been consistent for presidents of both parties for decades, as we can see from this chart. And yet here we are, 8 months into President Trump's second term, and not a single nominee confirmed by unanimous consent or voice vote. Zero, zip, nada. By the way, these nominees made it through committee with bipartisan support on the record. Democrats, Republicans both voted for them in committee, and yet we can't get them off the floor without tying up precious floor time. Now, that may sound like process. It may sound like, oh my gosh, they're talking about time. This is how the Senate works in terms of getting a nomination through quickly, allowing the legislative issues addressing our country to then be faced. It's a full-blown example of Democrats not caring if the business of government gets done. They would rather obstruct President Trump than to allow the American people to be served. Now, Americans are sick of it. They want Congress to work, and Republicans are showing up to work. We are ready to conform the people required to work in government to keep the country running. But Democrats, holding nominees for ransom, it seems for no other reason than their desire to obstruct President Trump. So, why does Congress have such a low approval rating? Why do people think this place doesn't work? It's because of stunts like this blowing up the standard operating procedure, which allows us to actually get onto the work of the people, all to score cheap political points. Now, the American people chose President Trump. They gave Republicans control of the House and the Senate. They told us the agenda they wanted pursued. So when Democrats dig in their heels, kick and scream, they are proving that they did not hear the message the American people sent last November. If no one's standing with you but your own party insiders, and maybe the occasional liberal cable news host, then your resistance isn't brave. It's meaningless. It's an obstruction. It is only there to defeat the will of the American people. It is noise. The American people deserve better. Republicans are ready to deliver. And with that, I yield.
President.
The Senator from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to discuss the unprecedented obstruction by my Democrat colleagues, which brings us here today, and the activity we're going to see on the floor this week and next. Article 1, Section 2, Clause 2 of the Constitution requires that every officer of the United States receive the advice and consent of the Senate. This is a very important function. At times it can seem tedious, I suppose, on the floor when we're voting on some of these, but this is contemplated by our founding fathers to be a really important part of the process of getting good qualified people in important positions in the executive branch. With that power comes responsibility. The Democrats have completely abandoned that advice and consent, instead moving forward with complete obstruction. Unprecedented. Now that term gets thrown around a lot in this town. Every day somebody says something's unprecedented, and it's not actually unprecedented. This really is unprecedented. In the almost 250 years of our country, and of course a little bit sooner than that, when we had the first Congress, a little bit later than that when we had our first Congress, we've never seen anything like this, like not even close. The minority leader would rather burn all the norms down than do it like we've done it before, even though that process is sort of eroded to some degree in recent years. Never anything like this. And for those of you watching at home or in the gallery here today, we're glad to have you. The Senate kind of operates in three calendars. Let's just put it in those terms, three operational modes. One is the legislative calendar, when we have bills that come up, the NDAA, the continuing resolution, appropriations bills, that kind of stuff. Now let's be clear, what the minority leader has already said he would do, and what Democrats in this chamber have already voted for, which is to completely eliminate the legislative filibuster. If they were in charge, if they were in the position that Republicans are in right now, they'd blow it up. DC's added as a state, maybe Puerto Rico, court packing. I mean, they voted on this stuff. I'm not making this up. They campaign on this stuff. The minority leader would like to have happen on the legislative calendar. Let's talk about the impeachment calendar. Well, last year, we saw the Secretary of Mayorkas impeached by the House of Representatives. The articles of impeachment are transferred over here. We're all sitting on our desks. And for the first time in the history of this country, there wasn't a trial. Now, trials looked a little bit different. Sometimes they're in committee, sometimes they're in front of the full Senate, but not a single instance in the history of this country where the person who was impeached who either is still alive or in that office hasn't had a trial. So he blew that up. And now we're dealing with the executive calendar, which is essentially where all the personnel decisions are made. We approve ambassadors, we approve cabinet secretaries, judges, U.S. attorneys, marshals, all that stuff. There has been not a single instance, not one time, has there been a unanimous consent granted in this chamber. Not once. That's never happened before. And we'll talk about some of those details here as we move a little bit further along in this debate. But just to add a little meat onto the bones, in defiance of the vision of the founders, the Democrat obstruction leaves President Trump on pace to have just 426 nominees confirmed by the end of the 119th Congress. That's if we're working at the pace, which is unprecedented. I don't mind it. We can be here. I'm not afraid of hard work. But if we're here as much as we've been here just to get to that number, which is the lowest in history, less than half of what Joe Biden had at this point in time, 817, or even President Trump's first term of 715. So at the end of the first Congress, those are the numbers. So it's not even close. It's less than half of the total number. By the end of his term, we're projecting that a mere 872 confirmations, so the full 4 years, would actually get through. And that would be the first time in the history of the country that that number would fall below 1,000, compared to Joe Biden's 1,175 and President Trump's first term, which is about that same number, about 1,200, and President Obama's staggering number of almost 1,500. So it's not just slow, it's sabotage. Echoing the darkest days of the most partisan feuds that we had threatening our young republic 200 years ago. Democrats have required cloture 360% more in President Trump's first term, in his first term's 200 days, than in his first. 137 nominees subjected to it, nearly double Biden's 71 and far beyond Obama's paltry 9. In the past, over 50% of every president's nominees were confirmed via voice vote or unanimous consent, until this year, where President Trump has received 0.0. Blutarsky. That's unprecedented. Under Obama, in his first 200 days, 292 nominees passed by voice vote alone. President Trump has just 135 confirmed, all via overcoming, except Marco Rubio, overcoming filibusters. Every single one, save the first one, has been filibustered. To put that in perspective, Clarence Thomas, perhaps the most controversial Supreme Court judge as far as that vote went, got 52 votes. It wasn't even filibustered. All of these are being filibustered, including the general counsel to the Department of Transportation. The average time for nomination, from nomination to confirmation, a glacial pace of 94 days. Nearly double President Trump's first term of 54, worse than Biden's 70, and a far cry from Reagan's efficient 25 days. We've shattered records with the most Senate session days and roll call votes in modern history. 126 days in the first 200, more than Biden's 121, yet the backlog swells. 139 nominees on the executive calendar, 153 in committee, 786 not yet received. This obstruction is antithetical to our constitutional design. You can have problems with nominees, you can vote no, you can even filibuster some of them. But to filibuster all of them and not have a voice vote on any of them is a symptom of something else. Trump derangement syndrome. They can't get over the fact that President Trump actually won. They thought by coming on this floor as the minority leader did so often, of calling half the country MAGA extremists, trying to bankrupt him and his family and throw him in jail for the rest of their life, of his life. They thought that thing was over. But the American people sat in their own jury box and they watched all of this nonsense unfold for the last 4 years, and they rendered their own verdict. And it was for reform. It was for the very kind of people that President Trump is putting up for these positions. So to subvert that democratic process, the sand has been thrown into the gears of our republic in a way we've never seen before, and that's what we're here to fix. The Democrats have turned the cooling saucer of the Senate into a deep freezer. But here's the good news. A great thaw is coming. The Republicans in this place are going to return the Senate back to what it was always meant to be able to do, which is to actually function and vote on confirmations. It's not that tall of an ask. But again, blinded by TDS, and quite frankly, if you talk to some of my Democrat colleagues, like I have privately, they understand that this is a real problem. They know that this is wrong. But they can't be seen by their increasingly radical base of doing anything that would be perceived as helping President Trump. So here we are. The conditions have been set, the landscape has been made, and it's time for action. I would argue that this isn't actually even a new phenomenon. This has been a slow-moving disaster 25 years in the making. After the 2000 elections, Democrats met at a private retreat to strategize how to maximally obstruct the Republicans, 25 years ago. A couple of leftist Harvard professors concocted an idea: filibuster the executive calendar. The minority leader wasn't done there. Just yesterday, he blew up our entire system on a voice vote, on voice voting in the Senate. When push came to shove, he would rather blow up all the norms of this place to hold on to the power that is slipping away from him. He's going to have another test when it comes to continuing resolution, but we're dealing with this right now. The decisions of the minority leader over the course of the last 25 years has led us to this place. So if anybody uses the term gone nuclear, just understand we're having to deal with the nuclear option that has already been executed on the Senate chamber, which is to say we're filibustering everything and there's no unanimous consent on anything. That's the nuclear option, and we have to react to it. One final note here. What we're really trying to do is restore the balance, and using a proposal that was submitted by a couple of our Democrat colleagues. In their words, and this is, by the way, their words, not my words, the showdown of the confirmation, quote, the showdown of the confirmation process that we've seen in the Senate under the last several administrations is preventing key officials from taking up their positions. The en bloc proposal being referred to is, quote, this common sense reform will help improve efficiency and make sure we're able to fill positions that are vital to our national security, economic success, and more. When the Democrats proposed that solution very recently, 62% of Biden's nominees had already been confirmed by voice vote. So think about that. 2/3 of his people were in place, and they were calling for the reform. Guess how many have been confirmed by voice vote now? 0%. So we're going to take them up on their offer of reform. And I appreciate the majority leader moving this forward to restore, again, the very important balance that our founders knew was necessary for this republic to survive. America demands no less. Thank you, Mr. President.
President.
Senator from Texas.
Mr. President, I want to begin by thanking our colleagues, particularly from Oklahoma and Alabama, for leading the working group that was appointed by the majority leader to try to solve this problem. In their typical deliberative and careful and thoughtful fashion, they could have come up with a lot of ideas that would, I think, perhaps overreach. But rather than do that, they've come up with a solution that Democrats themselves have proposed, which to me strikes me as the epitome of fairness. But there are three main points I want to make before I sort of summarize where I think we are. First of all, as my colleagues have eloquently noted, we have exhausted virtually every other alternative to this vote to overrule the parliamentarian and establish a new precedent, which is an alternative to a formal rule change which takes 67 votes. But we know our colleagues will never vote for that, leaving us no alternative but to invoke what is sometimes called the nuclear option. But as our colleague from Missouri just pointed out, this is really not so much a nuclear option as a restoration option. This is restoring the Senate to the way it used to work, not just before President Trump was reelected, but for the last couple hundred years, where we had an orderly process to consider a president's nominees, a committee process to vet them, and then a debate and a vote on the Senate floor, so that the mandate of the voters in the presidential election can be carried out by the president. So we've tried virtually everything else, but I'm going to give them one last chance here in a minute. But then as I've been thinking about it, what have we been doing while we've spent hour upon hour, day upon day, week upon week, trying to move through all these various Senate-confirmed nominees with no help, not just no help, but with active obstruction by our Democratic colleagues? I think about all the other things that we could be working on, even together, bipartisan solutions to our nation's biggest problems and challenges. Economists call that opportunity cost. In other words, when you're mired down in this mindless obstruction and blocking any nominee just because they happen to be nominated by President Trump, you're missing the opportunity to do other important things. And I know all of my colleagues, all 100 of us, came here to hopefully do important things. And that has been the source of great consternation and disappointment, I know, to many of us. But then I think about the people who have been nominated by President Trump. I've had them tell me this is an honor of a lifetime. People who've enjoyed tremendous success in business or in their professional life, to then give all that up in order to serve their country. These are patriots. And it is profoundly unfair to them, to their families, and to the American people to continue to block these nominees and leave them basically hanging in the wind. I've talked to many of them myself, these nominees, asking, Senator, when can I expect a vote on the Senate floor? I said, well, I don't know. Many of them have said, well, I've had to quit my job or sell my business. I've had to go through a rigorous vetting process for ethics and legal conflicts of interest, and I'm waiting. And my family is waiting, not knowing whether we will be going to maybe an embassy somewhere around the world or serve in some other important position here in Washington, D.C. in the Trump administration. So this is profoundly unfair to them. And we wonder whether we are having a hard time getting good people to want to serve in government. Well, thankfully, there are still people who are willing to do it despite the way they get treated when they are nominated. Thank goodness there are still good people who want to serve. Our nation depends on it. But just to summarize, more than 140 of President Trump's nominees are waiting to be voted on as we speak. I don't know how you argue the converse of what I feel to be the case, which is the president won the election on November the 5th, and he's at least entitled to an up or down vote on the nominations. And the American people are the ones who actually gave him that mandate. And this is a kick in the teeth, a punch in the gut to those voters who voted for President Trump in this last election, expecting that he would bring change to Washington, D.C. But he can't accomplish that mandate without his team. As we've heard, Senate Democrats are now engaged in an unprecedented level of obstruction, preventing these nominees from being confirmed, burning up all the floor time when we're in session on waiting around to vote on these nominees, most of whom in the past would have been confirmed by a voice vote or some sort of expedited process, by consent even, but not with Donald J. Trump as president. Democrats have taken a completely different approach and obstructing each and every one of his nominees. Most of these individuals are uncontroversial. I remember the other day we were voting on General Counsel for Advocacy for the Small Business Administration. And I asked myself, what is that? And yes, maybe, just maybe, we should limit the number of Senate-confirmed positions. I think that might be a good exercise to go through and see, are there people who currently require Senate confirmation that it really isn't necessary because they only serve for a short period of time under the leadership of maybe a cabinet-confirmed, a member of the president's cabinet that is Senate-confirmed. But under President George Herbert Walker Bush and President Clinton, 98% of those nominees were confirmed by unanimous consent. Under George W. Bush and President Obama, 90% were confirmed by unanimous consent. That's no debate, no argument, just a unanimous consent request without objection, so ordered. During President Trump's first term in office, only 65% were, so you can see the slide from 98 to 90 to 65, and what we've also learned is what goes around comes around. President Biden, his number was 57%. But that's a far cry from what we've seen in President Trump's second term, with zero of these non-controversial nominees, patriots who want nothing but to serve their country, being denied that opportunity out of blind partisan obstruction, mindless obstruction. And the only way it can be explained, the senator from Missouri mentioned Trump derangement syndrome, and this is it in all of its ugly manifestation. There's no other explanation. Now, changing the Senate rules is not something we do lightly, because we know what comes around, but the truth is, Republicans are more than willing to live with the change in the rules when Democrats are in the majority, when there's a Democrat president, which someday there may well be. So we are acting on behalf of all senators, of all presidents, of all nominees, and the entire American people when we say something has to change, and we are going to change it this week. I know all of us would prefer to deal with this in some way other than overruling the parliamentarian and invoking the so-called nuclear option, but we've exhausted all of the other possibilities. With one exception, perhaps. In a moment, I'm going to propose a unanimous consent request on a resolution that would allow the majority leader to call up at least 10 nominees advanced out of the same committee to be considered for a vote in block or all together. This is something very similar to that which the chairman of the Rules Committee, Senator Klobuchar from Minnesota, and Angus King, an independent from Maine, had proposed in 2023. And if Democrats were really interested in solving the problem, if they were really interested in restoring the Senate to its previous reputation as the world's greatest deliberative body, they wouldn't object, they would agree. It's their idea. But what remains to be seen is whether Senate Democrats will agree to their own proposal. If Senate Democrats will consent to this proposal, which I will propound momentarily, which will allow en bloc consideration of nominees, then we can avoid a rule change. But if they block this resolution, they will show their true colors. They will show that this is not about deliberation. This is not about what's in the best interest of the American people. This is not about genuine oversight. This is naked, partisan obstruction. It will then be clear to all of us across the country that Democrat objections to changing the rules have nothing to do with preserving the institutional integrity of the Senate, and more to do with their crusade against President Trump and the American people who elected him last November the 5th. We'll see if Senate Democrats would prefer to continue their historic obstruction or whether they would consent to let us carry out the essential function of this chamber to provide a vote. That's all we're asking for, is a vote on the nominations. Mr. President, as if in legislative session, I ask unanimous consent the Committee on Rules and Administration be discharged from further consideration of S-Res 379 and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration. Further, that the resolution be agreed to and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there an objection?
Mr. President,
Senator from California.
reserving the right to object. I've been listening to my colleague from Texas, and part of what he said a couple of times over the last several minutes was looking for some sort of explanation as to why Democrats are doing what we're doing. So let me attempt to respond to that. Can't help but observe that my colleague from Texas and Senate Republicans like to point out that Senate Democrats were proposing reforms to the nominations process in 2024. Yes, just last year. That's not a secret. A formal proposal was introduced. The Senate Rules Committee, of which I was a member and am now serving as ranking member this session, held a public hearing on these issues just over a year ago. There have been bipartisan discussions about these issues going back years. Senate Democrats led a bipartisan effort in 2024 for changes that would take effect in 2025. Now, why are those dates important? Because these proposals were made back when the outcome of last year's presidential election was unknown. Like, that's the ultimate fair way to do it. That's the way to get bipartisan support. These ideas are good or not good. You support them or don't support, regardless of who's president, which party is in power. But unfortunately, Senate Republicans at the time showed little interest in these reforms, not just last summer, even late into 2024. Can't help but observe that at the time they were engaging in their own unprecedented obstruction and blockades of President Biden's nominees. One Republican senator, held up routine promotions at the Department of Defense for nearly a year. Yes, I said Department of Defense, by the way. And they were planning to use these same tactics if then Vice President Harris had been elected president. But now with Donald Trump back in the White House, surprise, surprise, they're ready and set to make all these changes immediately. The truth is, we shouldn't be in this situation. On that much, I guess we do agree. But I'm not just talking about the process. Not just talking about the process. Since the beginning of the second Trump administration, this Senate has been faced with an unprecedented number of highly extreme and unqualified, unfit nominees. Many nominees whose stated goal is to dismantle the departments and agencies and programs with which they're being nominated to lead. Meanwhile, this administration is unlawfully impounding funds, firing people in droves, and abolishing agencies created by Congress. Actions that, if this Senate and Congress as a whole was living up to its responsibility as a separate but co-equal branch of government, the branch that's supposed to be providing oversight, accountability, that's so lacking by the majority. Yet, still, given all that, Senate Democrats have been willing to negotiate. We've been partners in good faith. There was even a bipartisan agreement on the table just before the August recess that we just returned from, a proposal that would expedite some of the less objectionable nominees. All the administration had to do was accommodate some reasonable requests, bipartisan requests, for that matter, from a number of senators. Now, that's the normal process. Presidents and administrations of both parties have cooperated with senators from both parties for decades to ensure confirmation of nominees. But Trump rejected that option just weeks ago. The president himself told Leader Schumer and Senate go to those three words are the president views Congress. It shows his contempt for Congress. And that's why we're in this situation when it comes to his nominees. Many, again, of whom are extreme and unfit in so many unprecedented ways. Talk about unprecedented. The way this administration is behaving is unprecedented. This is not normal. Now, it's clear that the president rejected a reasonable bipartisan agreement before the recess, and I appreciate my Republican colleagues' new interest in the 2024 proposal to reform the nomination process. So in that spirit of bipartisan cooperation, I think this is a very good chance that we can pass this with a very simple amendment to make the resolution effective January 20th, 2029. Nobody here knows who the president will be then. Nobody knows which party will control the White House or be in the majority in this body by then. Nobody can predict that, and that's exactly the point. If the rule is good, then let's do it not knowing who is going to be in power when it takes effect. So I invite discussion, negotiation about the effective date in this resolution, or, as my colleague from Texas suggested, maybe even revisiting the list of which nominees should require Senate confirmation. But this resolution doesn't even begin to discuss or address that. So as this resolution is currently drafted, it is unacceptable, and therefore I object.
Mr. President.
The objection is heard. The senator from Texas.
Mr. President, of course, I'm disappointed that our colleagues from California objecting on behalf of the Democrats in the chamber. But I just want to summarize what I think I heard him say. First, Democrats are prepared to hold all these nominees hostage pending some sort of agreement. Well, you heard from the senator from Alabama, the senator from Missouri, the senator from Oklahoma, all talk about the endless discussions with individual members of the Senate Democrats, many of whom are sympathetic to the problem, but were powerless to change it. Because the leadership, the minority leader, the senator from New York, who controls that caucus, would not hear of any sort of negotiation. We're all accustomed to negotiating around here. We do it on a daily basis. But we have tried in good faith every possible permutation short of this action that we are taking today. But I have to ask, is it in good faith to say, let's wait until 2029 to change the rules? What's President Trump supposed to do over the next 3 years? Govern with one arm tied behind his back without the team he was elected, that he has selected to help him govern the country? He won the election on last November the 5th. He got a mandate. People are sick and tired of the status quo here in Washington, D.C. They want to see change. They want to see things shaken up. But now Democrats are saying you've got to wait until 2029. That's obviously unacceptable. And then finally, I would just point out, we could have offered a number of different solutions to this problem, some that perhaps would advantage Republicans and disadvantage Democrats. But we haven't done that. We said, let's take a Democratic proposal from 2023 and offer that. Surely they think that's reasonable since they themselves have proposed it in the first instance. But what we've just heard is that Democrats won't even agree to that. Their own proposal, their own idea. So to me, it's abundantly clear that we've exhausted all the opportunities for negotiation. We've vetted a number of different alternatives, but it is this all-consuming, mindless, partisan objection to President Trump and his policies that are blinding our Democratic colleagues from doing what they know is right, which is to having a way with debate and with votes to give the American people a president who has a team to carry through the policies that they voted for on November the 5th. So, Mr. President, I am disappointed but not surprised. But I think we've done everything we can. This obstruction has to end, and it will end very soon.
Mr. President,
Senator from Wyoming.
Mr. President, I know of no further debate on the nomination.
Is there further debate? Hearing none, the question's on the nomination. Yeas and nays, is there a sufficient second? Appears to be. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks, Ms. Baldwin, Mr. Banks, Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Blackburn, Mr. Blumenthal, Ms. Blunt Rochester, Mr. Booker, Mr. Bozeman, Mrs. Brett, Mr. Budd, Ms. Cantwell, Mrs. Capito, Mr. Cassidy, Ms. Collins, Mr. Coons, Mr. Cornyn, Ms. Cortez Masto, Mr. Cotton, Mr. Kramer, Mr. Crapo, Mr. Cruz, Mr. Curtis, Mr. Daines, Ms. Duckworth, Mr. Durbin, Ms. Ernst, Mr. Fetterman, Mrs. Fisher, Mr. Gallego, Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mr. Haggerty, Ms. Hassan, Mr. Hawley, Mr. Heinrich, Mr. Hickenlooper, Ms. Hirono, Mr. Hoven, Mr. Husted, Mrs. Hyde-Smith, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Justice, Mr. Kane, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Kim, Mr. King, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Langford, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lujan, Ms. Lummis, Mr. Markey, Mr. Marshall, Mr. McConnell, Mr. McCormick, Mr. Merkley, Mrs. Moody, Mr. Moran, Mr. Moreno, Mr. Mullen, Ms. Murkowski, Mr. Murphy, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Ossoff, Mr. Padilla, Mr. Paul, Mr. Peters, Mr. Reed, Mr. Ricketts, Mr. Resch, Ms. Rosen, Mr. Rounds, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schiff, Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott of Florida, Mr. Scott of South Carolina, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Sheehy, Ms. Slotkin, Ms. Smith, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Thune, Mr. Tillis, Mr. Tuberville, Mr. Van Hollen, Mr. Warner, Mr. Warnock, Ms. Warren, Mr. Welch, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Mr. Young. Senators voting in the affirmative: Barrasso, Britt, Capito, Cornyn, Curtis, Langford, Thune. Senators voting in the negative: Baldwin, Cantwell, Coons, Cortez Masto, Duckworth, Hassan, Heinrich, Hickenlooper, Klobuchar, Lujan, Padilla, Schumer, Slotkin, Smith, Warner, Warnock, Warren. Mr. Wyden, Mr. Wyden? No. Mr. Schmidt? Mr. Schmidt? Aye. Mr. Wicker? Mr. Wicker? Aye. Mr. Kelly? Mr. Kelly? No. Mrs. Moody? Mrs. Moody? Aye. Mr. Merkley? Mr. Merkley? No. Mrs. Murray? Mrs. Murray? No. Mr. Booker? Mr. Booker? No. Mrs. Hyde Smith? Mrs. Hyde Smith? Aye. Mr. Cotton? Mr. Cotton? Aye. Mr. Schatz? Mr. Schatz? No. Mr. Scott? Mr. Scott of Florida? Aye. Mr. Cruz. Mr. Cruz, aye. Mr. Graham. Mr. Graham, aye. Mr. Ossoff. Mr. Ossoff, no. Mr. Budd, aye. Mr. Murphy, no. Ms. Collins, aye. Mr. Kennedy, aye. Ms. Rosen, no. Mr. Marshall, aye. Mrs. Blackburn, aye. Mr. Bozeman, aye. Mr. Rounds, aye. Mr. Whitehouse, no. Mr. Daines, aye. Mr. Kim, no. Mr. Moreno, aye. Mr. Sanders, no. Mr. Reed, no. Mr. Blumenthal, Mr. Blumenthal, no. Mr. Justice, aye. Mr. Lee, aye. Ms. Blunt Rochester, Ms. Blunt Rochester, no. Mr. Johnson, aye. Mr. Paul, aye. Mr. Grassley, aye. Mr. Moran, aye. Mr. Husted, aye. Mr. Sheehy, aye. Mr. Hoven, aye. Mr. Markey, no. Ms. Murkowski, aye.
He's gonna try to look in the archive folder, okay. What you can do is you can prep
Mrs. Fisher, aye.
previous
Ms. Also Brooks, no. Ms. Ernst, aye. Mr. Young, aye. Mr. Mullen, aye. Ms. Lummis, aye. Mr. McCormick, aye. Mr. Bennett, no. Mr. Kane, no. Mrs. Shaheen, no. Mr. Crapo, aye. Mr. Tuberville, aye. Mr. Cassidy, aye. Mr. Schiff, no. Mr. Tillis, aye. Mr. Fetterman, no. Mr. Banks, aye. Mrs. Gillibrand, no. Mr. Durbin, aye.
Is there a blue tag on the modification?
Mr. Scott of South Carolina, aye. Mr. Ricketts, aye. Mr. Durbin, no.
And then take that copy.
Mr. Risch, aye. Mr. King, no. Mr. Peters, no. Mr. Welch, aye. Mr. Gallego, no. Mr. Hawley, aye. Mr. McConnell, aye. Mr. Kramer, aye. Ms. Hirono, no. Mr. Sullivan, aye.
On this vote, the yeas are 53, the nays are 45. The nomination is confirmed. Under the previous order, the motion to reconsider is considered made and laid on the table, and the President will be immediately notified of the Senate's action.
Mr. President,
Majority Leader.
I move to proceed to legislative session.
The questions on the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
Not yet.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The motion is agreed to.
Mr. President, I move to proceed to executive session to consider Executive Calendar Number 1, Senate Resolution 377, and I ask for the ayes and nays.
Is there sufficient second?
Mr. President,
There appears to be. The yeas and nays are ordered.
Mr. President,
The Democratic leader.
I make a point of order that a motion to proceed to executive calendar number 1, SRES 377, is not in order because legislation that provides for the en bloc consideration of individual nominations on the executive calendar is legislative business. Therefore, such a resolution should be required to be considered in legislative session.
In the opinion of the chair, the Senate has not previously considered this question. Therefore, the chair, under the provisions of Rule 20, submits the question to the Senate for its decision. The question is a resolution for the en bloc consideration of specific nominations on the executive calendar required to be considered in legislative session?
Mr. President, I move to table and ask for the yeas and nays.
Is there sufficient second? There appears to be. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks, Ms. Baldwin, Mr. Banks, Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Blackburn, Mr. Blumenthal, Ms. Blunt-Rochester. Thank you. Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Blackburn, Mr. Blumenthal, Ms. Blunt-Rochester, Mr. Booker, Mr. Bozeman, Mrs. Britt, Mr. Budd, Ms. Cantwell, Mrs. Capito, Mr. Cassidy, Ms. Collins, Mr. Coons, Mr. Cornyn, Ms. Cortez Masto, Mr. Cotton, Mr. Kramer, Mr. Crapo, Mr. Cruz, Mr. Curtis. Thank you. Mr. Daines, Ms. Duckworth, Mr. Durbin, Ms. Ernst, Mr. Fetterman, Mrs. Fisher, Mr. Gallego, Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mr. Haggerty, Ms. Hassan, Mr. Hawley, Mr. Heinrich, Mr. Hickenlooper, Ms. Hirono, Mr. Hoven, Mr. Husted, Mrs. Hyde-Smith, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Justice, Mr. Kane, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Kim, Mr. King, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Langford, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lujan, Ms. Lummis, Mr. Markey, Mr. Marshall, Mr. McConnell, Mr. McCormick, Mr. Merkley, Mrs. Moody, Mr. Moran, Mr. Marino, Mr. Mullen, Ms. Murkowski, Mr. Murphy, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Ossoff, Mr. Padilla, Mr. Paul, Mr. Peters, Mr. Reed, Mr. Ricketts, Mr. Risch, Ms. Rosen, Mr. Rounds, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schiff, Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott of Florida, Mr. Scott of South Carolina, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Sheehy, Ms. Slotkin, Ms. Smith, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Thune, Mr. Tillis, Mr. Tuberville, Mr. Van Hollen, Mr. Warner, Mr. Warnock, Ms. Warren, Mr. Welch, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Mr. Young, Senators voting in the affirmative: Barrasso, Britt, Cassidy, Cornyn, Kramer, Curtis, Ernst, Fisher, Graham, Hawley, Husted, Hyde-Smith, Johnson, Langford, Lummis, McConnell, McCormick, Marino, Mullen, Paul, Ricketts, Risch, Scott of South Carolina, Tillis, Tuberville, and Young. Senators voting. Senators voting in the negative. Mr. Kennedy, aye. Senators voting in the negative: Blunt Rochester, Cortez Masto, Gallego, Gillibrand, Hirono, Kelly, King, Klobuchar, Lujan, Merkley, Murphy, Ossoff, Peters, Sanders, Schatz, Schiff, Schumer, Smith, Welch, and Whitehouse. Mr. Coons, no. Ms. Cantwell, no. Mrs. Capito, aye. Mr. Grassley, aye. Mr. Blumenthal, no. Mr. Fetterman, no. Mr. Haggerty. Mr. Haggerty, aye. Mr. Thune. Mr. Thune, aye. Mrs. Shaheen. Mrs. Shaheen, no. Mrs. Moody. Mrs. Moody, aye. Mr. Kane. Mr. Kane, no. Mrs. Murray. Mrs. Murray, no. Mr. Banks. Mr. Banks, aye. Mr. Heinrich. Mr. Heinrich, no. Ms. Murkowski. Ms. Murkowski, aye. Ms. Duckworth. Ms. Duckworth, no. Mr. Wicker. Mr. Wicker, aye. Mr. Justice, Mr. Justice, aye. Mr. Padilla, no. Mr. Rounds, aye. Mr. Wyden, no. Mr. Sheehy, aye. Mr. Crapo, aye. Mr. Warner, no. Ms. Baldwin, no. Mr. Scott of Florida, aye. Mr. Bennett, no. Ms. Warren. Ms. Warren, no. Mr. Markey. Mr. Markey, no. Mr. Kim. Mr. Kim, no. Mr. Bozeman. Mr. Bozeman, aye. Mr. Warnock. Mr. Warnock, no. Mr. Cotton. Mr. Cotton, aye. Mr. Schmidt. Mr. Schmidt, aye. Mr. Durbin. Mr. Durbin, no. Mr. Reed. Mr. Reed, no. Mr. Moran. Mr. Moran, aye. Mr. Hoven. Mr. Hoven, aye. Ms. Also Brooks. Ms. Also Brooks, no. Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan, aye. Mr. Hickenlooper. Mr. Hickenlooper, no. Ms. Slotkin. Ms. Slotkin, no. Mr. Booker. Mr. Booker, no. Ms. Hassan. Ms. Hassan, no. Ms. Collins. Ms. Collins, aye. Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee, aye. Budd. Mr. Budd. Aye. Mr. Cruz. Mr. Cruz. Aye. Mrs. Blackburn. Mrs. Blackburn. Aye. Ms. Rosen. Ms. Rosen. No. Mr. Marshall. Mr. Marshall. Aye. Mr. Deans, aye.
On this vote, the yeas are 53, the nays are 46. The motion is agreed to. The question now occurs on the motion to proceed to executive session to consider executive calendar number 1, Senate Resolution 337. The yeas and nays were Senate Resolution 377. The yeas and nays were previously ordered. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks, Ms. Baldwin. Aye. Thank you. Mr. Banks. Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Bennett. Mrs. Blackburn. Mr. Blumenthal. Ms. Rochester. Mr. Booker. Thank you. Mr. Bozeman. I got you. I will. I got him. Thank you. No, no. Thank you, thank you. Thanks, bye. Mrs. Britt. Mr. Budd. Ms. Cantwell. Mrs. Capito. Mr. Cassidy. Ms. Collins. Mr. Coons. Mr. Cornyn. Ms. Cortez Masto. Mr. Cotton. Mr. Kramer. Mr. Crapo. Mr. Cruz. Mr. Curtis. Mr. Daines. Ms. Duckworth. Mr. Durbin. Ms. Ernst. Mr. Fetterman. Mrs. Fisher. Thank you. Mr. Gallego. Yeah. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mr. Graham. Mr. Grassley. Mr. Haggerty, Ms. Hassan, Mr. Hawley. Mr. Heinrich. Mr. Hickenlooper. Ms. Hirono. Mr. Hoven. Mr. Husted. Mrs. Hyde-Smith. Mr. Johnson, Mr. Justice. Mr. Kane, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Kim. I did not. Thank you.
Come and eat some of that. That's
Mr. King. Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Langford, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lujan, Ms. Lummis, Mr. Markey, Mr. Marshall, Mr. McConnell, Mr. McCormick, Mr. Merkley, Mrs. Moody, Mr. Moran, Mr. Marino, Mr. Mullen, Ms. Murkowski, Mr. Murphy, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Ossoff, Mr. Padilla, Mr. Paul, Mr. Peters, Mr. Reed, Mr. Ricketts, Mr. Risch, Ms. Rosen, Mr. Rounds, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schiff, Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott of Florida, Mr. Scott of South Carolina, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Sheehy, Ms. Slotkin, Ms. Smith, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Thune, Mr. Tillis, Mr. Tuberville, Mr. Van Hollen, Mr. Warner, Mr. Warnock, Ms. Warren, Mr. Welch, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Mr. Young, Senators voting in the affirmative: Banks, Blackburn, Budd, Collins, Kramer, Crapo, Cruz, Curtis, Daines, Ernst, Haggerty, Hawley, Hyde-Smith, Johnson, Kennedy, Lee, Marshall, McConnell, Risch, Rounds, Scott of Florida, Sullivan, Tillis, Tuberville, and Wicker. Mr. Cassidy, aye. Mr. Langford. Aye. Senators voting in the negative: Baldwin, Blumenthal, Blunt Rochester, Duckworth, Durbin, Fetterman, Gallego, Gillibrand, Hassan, Heinrich, Kane, Kelly, Kim, King, Klobuchar, Lujan, Murphy, Murray, Ossoff, Reed, Rosen, Sanders, Shaheen, Slotkin, Smith, Warner, Warnock, Warren, Welch, and Whitehouse. Ms. Cantwell, no. Mrs. Capito, aye. Mr. Thune, aye. And Mr. Wyden, no. Ms. Also Brooks, no. I have you. Mr. Padilla, no. Mr. Graham, aye. Mr. Schiff, no. Mr. Moran, aye. Mr. Grassley, aye. Mr. Hickenlooper, no. Mr. Schumer, no. Mr. Bozeman, aye. Mr. Hoven, aye. Mrs. Fisher, aye. Mr. Bennett, no. Mr. Cornyn, aye. Ms. Murkowski, aye. Mr. Paul, aye. Mr. Coons, no. Ms. Cortez Masto, no. Ms. Hirono, no. Mr. Markey, no. Mr. Justice, aye. Merkley. Mr. Merkley, no. Mr. Young, aye. Mr. Mullen, aye. Mr. Husted, aye. Mr. McCormick, aye. Mr. Ricketts, aye. Mr. Booker, no. Mr. Cotton, aye. Mr. Schmidt, aye. Mr. Schatz, no. Mr. Barrasso, aye. Mr. Sheehy, aye. Mr. Scott of South Carolina, aye. Thank you. Ms. Lummis, aye. Mrs. Britt, aye. Mr. Marino, aye. Mrs. Moody, aye.
The yeas are 53, the nays are 45, and the motion is agreed to. The clerk will report.
Executive Calendar Number 1, Senate Resolution 377, authorizing the en bloc consideration in executive session of certain nominations on the executive calendar.
Mr. President, I send a cloture motion to the desk for Executive Calendar Number 1, SRS 377.
The clerk will report the cloture motion.
Cloture motion, we, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, do hereby move to bring to a close debate on Executive Calendar Number 1, Senate Resolution 377, an executive resolution authorizing the en bloc consideration in executive session of certain nominations on the executive calendar, signed by 17 senators as follows.
Mr. President, I ask consent to reading the names be waived.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I move to proceed to legislative session.
The question is on the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The motion is agreed to.
Mr. President,
Senator from Wyoming.
I ask unanimous consent that the Senate be in a period of morning business with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
As if in an executive session, I ask consent to move to proceed to Executive Calendar 101, and I make a point of order that the nomination was not properly reported.
The point of order is sustained. The nomination will be returned to committee.
As if in executive session, I ask consent to move to proceed to Executive Calendar 102, and I make a point of order that the nomination was not properly reported.
The point of order is sustained. The nomination will be returned to committee.
As if in executive session, I ask consent to move to proceed to Executive Calendar 104, and I make a point of order that the nomination was not properly reported.
The point of order is sustained. The nomination will be returned to committee.
As if in executive session, I ask consent to move to proceed to Executive Calendar 146, and I make a point of order that the nomination was not properly reported.
The point of order is sustained. The nomination will be returned to committee.
As if in executive session, I ask consent to move to proceed to Executive Calendar 147, and I make a point of order that the nomination was not properly reported.
The point of order is sustained. The nomination will be returned to committee.
As if in executive session, I ask consent to move to proceed to Executive Calendar 148, and I make a point of order that the nomination was not properly reported.
The point of order is sustained. The nomination will be returned to committee.
As if in executive session, I ask consent to move to proceed to Executive Calendar number 150, and I make a point of order that the nomination was not properly reported.
The point of order is sustained. The nomination will be returned to committee.
As if in executive session, I ask consent to move to proceed to Executive Calendar number 174, and I make a point of order that the nomination was not properly reported.
Point of order is sustained. The nomination will be returned to committee.
As if in executive session, I ask consent to move to proceed to Executive Calendar number 175, and I make a point of order that the nomination was not properly reported.
The point of order is sustained. The nomination will be returned to committee.
As if in executive session, I ask consent to move to proceed to executive calendar number 187, and I make a point of order that the nomination was not properly reported.
The point of order is sustained. The nomination will be returned to committee.
As if in executive session, I ask consent to move to proceed to executive calendar number 188, and I make a point of order that the nomination was not
and it is the opinion of the chair the nomination will be returned to committee.
Mr. President, as if in executive session, I ask consent to move to proceed to executive calendar number 189, and I make a point of order that the nomination was not properly reported.
After consideration, the point of order is sustained. The nomination will be returned to committee.
As if in executive session, I ask consent to move to proceed to executive calendar number 190, and I make a point of order that the nomination was not properly reported.
Stunningly, the point of order is sustained, and the nomination will be returned to committee.
Mr. President, as if in executive session, I ask consent to move to proceed to executive calendar number 191, and I make a point of order that the nomination was not properly reported.
The chair is out of adjectives, and the point of order is sustained. The nomination will be returned to committee.
As if in executive session, I ask consent to move to proceed to executive calendar number 193, and I make a point of order that the nomination was not properly reported.
The point of order is sustained. The nomination will be returned to committee.
As if in executive session, I ask consent to move to proceed to executive calendar number 194, and I make a point of order that the nomination was not properly reported.
The point of order is sustained. The nomination will be returned to committee.
As if in executive session, I ask consent to move to proceed to executive calendar number 195, and I make a point of order that the nomination was not properly reported.
The point of order is sustained. The nomination will be returned to committee.
As if in executive session, I ask consent to move to proceed to executive calendar number 287, and I make a point of order that the nomination was not properly reported.
The point of order is sustained. The nomination will be returned to committee.
As if in executive session, I ask consent to move to proceed to executive calendar number 288, and I make a point of order that the nomination was not properly reported.
Point of order is sustained. The nomination will be returned to committee.
As if in executive session, I ask consent to move to proceed to executive calendar number 308, and I make a point of order that the nomination was not properly reported.
The point of order is sustained. The nomination will be returned to committee.
As if in executive session, I ask consent to move to proceed to executive calendar number 309, and I make a point of order that the nomination was not properly reported.
The point of order is sustained. The nomination will be returned to committee.
As if in executive session, I ask consent to move to proceed to executive calendar number 343, and I make a point of order that the nomination was not properly reported.
The point of order is sustained. The nomination will be returned to committee.
As if in executive session, I ask consent to move to proceed to executive calendar number 351, and I make a point of order that the nomination was not properly reported.
The point of order is sustained, and the nomination will be returned to committee.
I understand that there are two bills at the desk, and I ask for their first reading en bloc.
The clerk will read the titles of the bills for the first time.
S-2748, a bill to establish a program to beautify the District of Columbia and to establish the District of Columbia Safe and Beautiful Commission and for other purposes. H.R. 4553, an act making appropriations for energy and water development and related agencies for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2026, and for other purposes.
I now ask for a second reading, and I object to my own request, all en bloc.
Objection having been heard, the bills will receive their second reading on the next legislative day.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the appointment at the desk appear separately in the record as if made by the chair.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that Rick Berger and Brad Patout, members of Senator Wicker's committee staff, be granted full floor passes for the remainder of the consideration of calendar number 115 S2296 FY 2026 National Defense Authorization Act.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I have 3 requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and minority leaders.
Duly noted.
I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business today, it stands adjourned until 10 a.m. on Wednesday, September 10th. That following the prayer and pledge, the Journal of Proceedings be approved to date, the morning hour be deemed expired, the time for the 2 leaders be reserved for their use later in the day, morning business be closed, and the Senate resume consideration of calendar number 115 S2296, the National Defense Authorization Act.
Without objection. So ordered.
If there is no further business to come before the Senate, I ask that it stand adjourned under the previous order following the remarks of Senator Whitehouse.
Without objection.
Mr. President.
Senator from Rhode Island.
Mr. President, sailors and pilots know to look out for dangerous weather ahead. Politicians can get lost in the moment. We are on the verge of a major economic shock, but Congress is lost in the moment, not paying attention. Well, when that economic shock hits, I want people to know how and why we failed to protect them. The shock is simple. Climate change makes property insurance unpredictable, so insurance prices soar, insurers withdraw from high-risk regions, and fake or flimsy insurance populates the market. As the insurance market goes, so goes the mortgage market, given the many linkages between insurance and mortgages. As mortgage markets fail, property values fall, since there is way less demand for real estate properties that are unmortgageable. The combination threatens a reprise of the 2008 Great Recession, or worse. It's what economists call systemic risk, the scariest word in the economic lexicon because it means the damage cascades throughout the entire economy, hitting everyone. Remember 2008. Everybody hurt. This cascade is pretty broadly predicted by insurers, economists, bankers, regulators, even the big short guy who predicted the Great Recession. The Economist magazine has warned of a $25 trillion hit to global real estate values. Yes, I said trillion. Even climate-shy Fed Chair Powell predicted whole regions of the U.S. would soon go without mortgages. So, why the big fail here? Why aren't we paying attention to the great climate insurance collapse that is looming and predicted? To understand that, you have to understand the 4 phases of climate denial, because fossil fuel-funded climate denial is the root of the danger. Phase 1 of climate denial for the fossil fuel industry was simple: bury the evidence. Decades ago, many decades ago, scientists in the fossil fuel industry warned about climate change. Exxon, Chevron, Shell, American Petroleum Institute, all got internal warnings decades ago of the danger ahead. Instead of facing up to the problem and looking for solutions, they buried the evidence and acted as if they'd never been told. Just keep it secret was phase 1. Phase 2 was to begin actively misleading the public. 2 things coincided to kick off phase 2. One was scientists outside the fossil fuel industry beginning to publicly discuss the climate dangers of fossil fuel combustion. And not just fringe scientists either, but leading scientists from places like NASA. NASA's pretty good with science, you know, man on the moon, rovers driving around Mars. Anyway, Congress perked up, hearings were held, and what Exxon and others knew was brought out into the public daylight. The second thing that kicked off phase 2 was a federal court decision against the tobacco industry and its front groups for fraudulently misleading the public about the dangers of tobacco. Federal Judge Gladys Kessler, God rest her soul, she passed away 2 years ago in March, put the tobacco industry and its front groups under court order to stop the lying and knock off the fraud. No more lying, no more fraud. That decision put the tobacco industry's denial operation out of work, at least on tobacco. But it gave fossil fuel a prefab denial operation to take over. And suddenly, a lot of people and a lot of front groups who had been expert in how tobacco smoke wasn't bad for you suddenly became expert in how fossil fuel emissions wouldn't wreck the Earth's climate. So that kicked off phase 2, with public recognition of the dangers and attention of Congress. The tobacco fraud operation became the fossil fuel fraud operation. Same entities, same people, same tactics. For years, the fossil fuel industry used that operation and actually expanded and multiplied that tobacco operation to sow false doubt about climate science and to fraudulently suggest we'd all be worse off if we solved the fossil fuel emissions problem. One sidebar here. That all seems terribly expensive. Well, yes and no. Yes, in that billions and billions of dollars were spent on the climate denial fraud operation. Just the work to capture the Supreme Court so it would be friendly to fossil fuel polluters has been estimated at roughly $600 million. And that work was just one aspect of the vast climate denial fraud operation. On the other hand, you have to understand what the climate denial fraud operation was protecting. The fossil fuel industry floats on the biggest economic subsidy in human history, thanks to its free-to-pollute business model. The value to fossil fuel interests of that subsidy from being allowed to pollute for free has been calculated by the International Monetary Fund at north of $600 billion every year. Every single year, $600+ billion worth of free pollution that we all pay for in various ways. Honest calculations of what's called the social cost of carbon pollution differ a bit, but they're all in the hundreds of billions of dollars. So when the fossil fuel industry picked up the tobacco fraud operation and multiplied it, cost was no object. Imagine, for example, if they spent $6 billion a year on their climate fraud operation. That pays them back over $100 every year for every single dollar spent. If they spent $60 billion a year, it's a 10-to-1 payback. It makes the climate fraud operation likely the most lucrative segment of the fossil fuel industry. So let's just say phase 2 was robust. Over 100 front groups, billions of dollars, stables of fake scientists, massive Madison Avenue propaganda campaigns, even attack goons to go after scientists and reporters. It was and is probably the biggest fraud operation in history. But a fair campaign of lies against truth, even with billions of dollars behind the lies, won't guarantee a win for the lies. So phase 2, even with all of its billions, had its limits. That brings us to phase 3, unleashed by the Citizens United decision, a truly toxic decision delivered by an all-Republican panel of 5 on the Supreme Court. That decision did 2 things. One, as a legal matter, it unleashed infinite special interest money into our political system. 2, as a practical matter, it allowed that money to be anonymous, what's called dark money, flowing into the political system through front groups that obscure the actual donor, keeping citizens in the dark about who's who in the political arena and who's behind what they're being told. Basic information to accomplish the office of citizen in this great republic denied to the citizens. The fossil fuel industry sought that decision, was prepared for that decision, and moved aggressively to flood dark money into elections. It's a whole separate speech about fossil fuels' role in that Citizens United decision. But the important thing was that they won. Dark money corruption now could buttress climate denial fraud. In the contest between truth and lies, lies now had not only billions, but an enormous new dark money thumb on the political scale. There's a famous saying that it's hard to get someone to understand something when their salary depends on them not understanding it. Thank you, Upton Sinclair. Well, right away, the Republican Party came to depend on that fossil fuel money. And no surprise, its understanding of climate change vanished. It wasn't always like this. It was not always like this. Not on corruption, not on climate denial. Super PACs didn't even used to exist. Non-disclosing 501c4s stayed out of political elections. Entities like Donors Trust that exist solely to launder off donor identities just were not a thing. Shadowy political front groups and shell corporations weren't even worth setting up until secret political spending could surge into the billions. That whole corrupting, toxic political ecosystem has developed to enable dark money power. It's all new, and it all stinks. Climate denial is the same. In the 3 years after I came to the Senate and before the toxic decision in Citizens United, big, beautiful, bipartisan Senate climate bills were common. I can think of 4 offhand, real ones that would have really reduced emissions. And Republican presidential candidate John McCain ran in 2008 on a perfectly decent climate platform. No denial, no fraud. Please remember, it once was that way. Then, Citizens United was decided in January of 2010, and since that day, there has not been a single serious bipartisan climate bill in the Senate. Not one. The echocardiogram of bipartisan Senate climate action blipped and flatlined. Now for over 15 years. The combination of the fossil fuel industry's massive climate denial fraud operation and the fossil fuel industry's massive dark money political corruption operation was a deadly combination. It was lethal. Just as the fossil fuel industry intended, these crooked, semi-covert operations protected its annual $600+ billion freedom to pollute subsidy. And the pollution spewed and spewed and spewed. The legendary political wheeler-dealer Mark Hanna said, "There are 2 things that are important in politics. The first is money, and I can't remember what the second one is." Historian John Barry observed, "When you mix politics and science, you get politics." Up against that kind of money in politics, science never stood a chance against fossil fuels' lies. Now, we're in phase 4. The phase where an increasingly desperate fossil fuel operation switches from defense to offense, burying the evidence, running the climate denial fraud operation, and corrupting politics with dark money. All were essentially defense. At all costs, protect that free to pollute $600+ billion annual subsidy. Phase 4 is different. Phase 4 is fossil fuel on offense, using the power of government to crush fossil fuels' clean energy competition. Phase 4 kicked off with Trump Fossil fuel may be an evil industry in its politics, but it's not a stupid one. It knows it's losing. It sees the clean energy cost trends. It knows free, clean fuels like the sun and wind must inevitably win. It knows that a commodity's price set by a foreign cartel will sooner or later blow up in its face. It knows that polluting for free, contrary to moral as well as economic and environmental principles, can only be protected for so long. It knows that last year, 95% of new power coming onto the grid in the United States was clean power: wind, solar, and battery storage. Fossil fuel knows its days are numbered. So, it has infiltrated the Trump administration and is running the United States government for its own benefit from the inside. There's a kind of wasp, a wasp that injects its larvae into another bug. And its larvae then take over the command and control systems of that unfortunate bug from the inside. The larvae drive the bug around like you or I might drive a car around, except that the larvae are eating it from the inside at the same time. That's a good image to keep in mind about the corrupt Trump regime and who's driving it. Under Trump, the government of the United States is being driven by those fossil fuel larvae to attack cheaper, cleaner, less subsidized energy competitors that are winning against polluting fossil fuel. There was a time when Republicans used to say, government shouldn't pick winners and losers. Like so many vanishing Republican principles, what a laugh that one now is. Trump asked this industry for $1 billion in campaign cash. And who knows what he got, but it was provably hundreds of millions. The Republican Party is as dependent on fossil fuel dark money as a deep-sea diver is on his air hose. Pinch that flow just a little, and the diver will dance whatever jig he's told to dance to get his airflow back. So, Republicans dance the fossil fuel denial fraud jig. Just a highlights reel is enough to expose the rot. Trump's energy executive order denied that solar and wind energy were even energy, violating the very dictionary. Republicans went to bat using the Congressional Review Act to defend the worst methane leakers, the ones that weren't even meeting their own industry standards. Keep leaking, guys, was the message. Senate Republicans even went nuclear, overruling our parliamentarian to undo the auto emission standards followed by much of the country. Never mind the damage to the auto industry. Trump illegally shut down nearly finished wind farms whose clean electrons would displace gas-generated electrons as soon as next year. Those clean electrons also save consumers tens of millions. Less pollution, more savings. We can't have that, said Republicans. They've even undone the social cost of carbon rules, as if the pollution wasn't real, and are trying to undo the endangerment finding, as if the pollution isn't a danger. It's all a pack of lies and nonsense, but it has a purpose: crush America's clean energy industry. It's a separate speech what economic damage that does to America in international competition as the rest of the world moves to clean energy and we get left behind. So where are we? Thanks to fossil fuels' massive climate denial fraud and dark money political corruption, storm clouds loom ahead. Florida is our preview of coming attractions. An insurance market in grave distress, mortgage markets beginning to tremble, middle-class families finding it hard to sell homes. The chief economist of Freddie Mac some years ago predicted this cascade, from insurance to mortgages to property values to what he then called a coastal property values crash that would hit the entire economy like the 2008 Great Recession. Note that word coastal. Well, it's not just coastal anymore. Wildfire now matches coastal as an added threat that can trigger that economic cascade into collapse. On top of that looms the long-predicted carbon bubble. What's the carbon bubble? That's when the fossil fuel industry collapses in a sudden and disorderly fashion because we were irresponsible about a gradual and reliable energy transition. And by the way, it's not coastal or wildfire or carbon bubble collapse. All three could happen. Each collapse making the others faster and more deep and dangerous and painful. Remember Hemingway's notorious line that you go broke gradually and then all at once. What could provoke this already gradual collapse to suddenly go all at once? Well, there are a lot of ways this could happen. One is related to OPEC. Say a low-cost oil and gas producer like Saudi Arabia decides to sell fuel at cost rather than at the OPEC cartel price. When they see it's time to make the move for the exits and sell what they can while they still can. When they do that, the American fossil fuel industry rapidly collapses because our fossil fuel industry can no longer compete. It's only profitable at puffed up OPEC cartel prices, not at the prices Saudi Arabia could bring to the market if it chose to. So instant crash. Here's another scenario. Fannie and Freddie, the mortgage giants, stop accepting mortgages insured by Florida's flimsy pop-up property insurance companies, over a dozen of which have already gone bust since Hurricane Irma in 2017. It is a huge taxpayer liability for Freddie and Fannie to assume all that risk without credible insurance. Local Florida banks won't hold those mortgages because the 30-year risk to a bank is not survivable. Florida becomes a region, Chairman Powell predicted, where you can't get mortgages anymore. A massive asset repricing then follows that triggers systemic economic damage, perhaps even cascading globally, as The Economist magazine warned. The trusty sign that I've worked with all these years through hundreds of speeches is time to wake up. I'm not sure we can save ourselves any longer. We've blown so many chances. The remaining pathway to climate safety is steep and narrowing, and the climate chasm deepens by the day. The evil forces that put us in this danger are more powerful, desperate, and malevolent than ever. The massive economic shock so many foresee could come next week, next month, or next year. It may now be too late to prevent it. It may now be too late to wake up. I hope we can pull this off, but our chances have really slimmed. So I'm here because I for damn sure want people to know why we got to this dangerous precipice and who is to blame. Chalk it up to a massive, semi-covert operation of industrial-scale disinformation and dark money influence run against our country from within by a polluting industry fighting to pollute for free, and by the politicians who enabled it for money. Madam President, I yield the floor.
The Senate stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning.